Hello, my name is Darren. I have loads of people telling me that I am crazy because I tell them that I can make people do things and hypnotize them, etc. I wouldn't stoop to the level of recording myself, making them act silly without their knowledge, etc. Because if they don't believe me in my gifts, that's their problem, not mine. I'm not going to record them so they can look back at them acting stupid and having no recollection of it. No, if they don't believe me, that is their problem. My girlfriend was arguing with me for weeks about going to see a psychologist. I wouldn't even film myself using my gifts on her, as the same applies for her. If she doesn't believe me, then that's her problem, not mine. But I gave in to her arguing and eventually went to see a psychologist. My girlfriend drove me to the psychologist, and there wasn't a word spoken on the way there in the car. I was angry that my own girlfriend didn't believe in my powers. When I was sitting down in the psychologist's room, I felt betrayed that I had to sit here in front of someone who didn't even know me and, like everyone else, probably thinks I'm crazy. The psychologist was an annoying-looking man who said to me, "Hello, Darren. My name is Frederick Ryan. I am sure you will feel a lot better after our session. But first, please tell me why you are here today." I said, "I am here because everyone doesn't believe me that I have powers to make people do things against the will without them even realizing it. They have no recollection whatsoever of doing it. I am not filming anyone or anything to prove I have the gift." The psychologist said, "Well, Darren, I am sure you must realize why people are so reluctant in believing you. I mean, especially when they have no recollection of doing so. But Darren, I'm sure there is a good reason why you feel like you are actually doing these things. But in reality, they're just in your imagination. And when you come to the realization that you're just imagining these powers, then things will start coming together a lot easier in the puzzle." The session lasted about 30 minutes. When I was out of the building, I checked my phone to see the live stream I had of me making him dance around his office like an idiot without even realizing it. I laughed. I knew it was just me that filmed him, and just me that will be able to watch this video. I got a thrill when I saw myself confess to making a person who annoyed me stab themselves with my powers. But then I switched back to the live feed and forwarded it up to real time, right now. I didn't realize that he had actually been recording me also. Maybe he records all his subjects, but I could hear our conversation come out of his laptop speakers. I could see his face go weird when I was confessing about the murder. He then was getting his phone ready to make a call, more than likely the police. I used my powers to him bang the phone off his head over and over and over until it was a bloody mess, and he fell down on the floor, dead. I help people become eligible to live off government benefits for life, and I am pretty good at that, if you don't mind me saying. All in all, I think I am the most helpful person you will ever meet. Take Barry, for instance, who was sick of working in the construction company, and he wanted to live off government benefits and welfare. Because after 20 years of hard, back-breaking work, he couldn't take it anymore. I told him to meet me on some dead-end road. Barry waited for me on some empty, lonely road, which nobody uses, and as I drove up the road, Barry was standing on the road having a smoke. I then drove really fast, and I purposely hit Barry. He became paralyzed, and from then on Barry was eligible to live off government benefits and welfare. I gave him exactly what he wanted. Sam was on social media for a few years now, but didn't get half of the views he would have liked. He decided to hatch a plan to gain loads of followers and viewers. His plan consisted of him driving a taxi that he usually does, but something different for a live stream. He rigged the taxi with lots of cameras to film his customers. He had something very different planned for them. That difference was that he would have a needle in the back seat full of poison, and each customer who gets in would be killed from the poison going into their back. The needle tips were spread all over the back, so no matter where they would sit, they would get jabbed. He murdered about 10 people when his live stream went up to about 100,000 views. The local sheriff of Sam's town got tipped off after the 5th person was killed, so he was tracking the car by people giving tips of what was in the background of the live stream, giving away where it was originating from, even though Sam was constantly on the move apart from stopping for customers. The viewers helping the police eventually knew Sam seemed to be driving to his house. A while later there was a SWAT team outside Sam's house, and they knew from the live stream he was in the garage. He could see he was holding a gun up to people, and the SWAT team broke the garage door down and shouted, "Stop!" Sam jumped with fright, and one of the police officers' guns went off and shot Sam between the eyes. Then 10 of his victims came out shouting and screaming. The detective was relieved the poison in the needle didn't kill them, but must have just put them to sleep. Then things got worse than he could ever have imagined. When one of the people said, "Oh my God, why did you shoot Sam? We are all actors. This has all been a stunt. None of us were killed. Those needles were just rubber. They weren't real needles. We were just helping Sam stage a fake, crazy live stream of him killing people." The sheriff checked Sam's pulse. He was dead, and they realized he was guilty of staging a fake mass murder spree. My wife and I bought a house that was quite cheap for the area, and that was 2 years ago. We have 2 daughters together. At first, everything was fine, and nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Then one day we would find every chair, pot, jar and other household objects all divided into 2 corners. One corner of the household objects had a red mark on them, while the other half of household objects had a blue mark. We tried putting things back to where they were supposed to go, but everything ended up being divided into their corners again. Then one day I awoke with a blue mark on my arm, and same with my oldest daughter. We both found ourselves with the other household objects that also had a blue mark on them. My wife and my youngest daughter had a red mark on them, and they awoke alongside the household objects that had a red mark on them as well. We then brought in a psychic, and she told us that the spirits from the married couple who used to live in this house are now finally divorcing in the afterlife. They have split up everything 50-50 and marked them red and blue. Red is for the deceased husband, and the blue is for the deceased wife. My wife and I looked at each other, as we both knew we would be taken away. We knew we had to get out of this house or sell it as quick as possible. Then one day, some of the household objects that were divided into red and blue had disappeared. Our daughters were part of the disappearance. The two spirits are slowly taking their 50-50 divorce splits. Me and my wife are just waiting for us to get taken now. Jake was watching TV, and there was a program on about a hiking trail he always wanted to do. He knew it was a very long hike, and it would require a lot of perseverance, as the trail went on and on for miles. It was in the outback in Utah. He didn't want anyone to go with him on the hike, as he was looking for something to take his mind off his very stressful job as being a lawyer. Jake just wanted to relax for 2 weeks on the hike into the outback of Utah. On the day of his hike, he figured he would need snow gear, as the weather was so cold. Sure enough, when he was on his way, it began to snow. He picked the wrong time of the year, he told himself, but he proceeded to go through the trail. He was using his phone as a compass, but it didn't seem to help him much. He seemed to be getting nowhere. There was a huge snow blizzard arrived, and he tried to trek through the snow and find shelter. Eventually, he luckily came across a cave. He rested, hoping that he would get the energy to move out of this rut that he found himself in, trapped inside a cave in the middle of a wretched snow blizzard. He felt himself getting more and more disorientated. He felt like he could not even move with the numbing cold. He could feel the sting of the ice on his skin, and he felt he was going to die. But that survival instinct crept up in him and told him what he had to do. What he had to do to survive. He hoped the blizzard would pass, but unfortunately it went on for days and days. He had no problem with water, but he knew that if he didn't eat anything soon, he would eventually die. He was thankful of the snow he used for drinking water. He felt weak and looked down at his pants, knowing there would be a lot of meat on his leg. He knew what he had to do to survive. So he took a large knife from his bag and proceeded to cut parts of his leg off to eat. He died faster than he would have if he starved, as he bled to death in the freezing snow. Mary and Jeffrey had a teenage daughter called Susie. They were just your regular American family until one night the unspeakable happened. In the middle of an argument, Susie was hit so hard from her father she fell against the kitchen worktop and died soon after. They rang the police right away and explained everything. and Geoffrey was let off after a long drawn-out trial. Mary and Geoffrey were carrying the burden for 5 years when everything came crashing down on them with one phone call. Mary had answered the phone and first thought it was a sick prank, but after asking her a few questions, she knew they were answers only her daughter would know. It was her daughter on the phone. One question was, who did she sneak out the night before to meet? And the answer was her best friend Olivia. Those details weren't in the press. Susie asked her mum to get her dad and put him on the phone, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was his daughter that had died 5 years ago. Susie had told them to go down to the well at the bottom of the garden to meet her. Both Susie's parents felt like they were having some sort of nightmare. It was dark and they both walked down to the end of the garden. There was no one there. Suddenly they heard Susie's voice and could see a shadow of her in front of them. As she stepped towards them, they could make out it wasn't Susie, but her best friend Olivia. They both looked at her wondering what was happening. Olivia lifted up a shovel and said, "Ye really thought I was your daughter, the daughter ye killed just because of her sneaking out to meet me the night before." Mary lifted up her hands in fear and shouted, "No, Olivia, it was an accident. Susie fell and hit her head." Olivia shouted, "Do you realise it's because of your husband's anger that I am feeling guilty every single night and have nightmares?" With that, she hit Mary, then Geoffrey, over the head with the shovel and threw them both into the well. That night was the first night in a few months that she didn't have the recurring dream of Susie asking her to do what she had done.